Hello, people. Welcome back to another video by your good friend Chad Marco, the Big Anarchy. Make sure you guys check out my other social media and let's have a conversation. So, I was on my computer and I saw a comment pop up where somebody was suggesting that I go see a prostitute, because I'm a adult male virgin. And you guys know I already made a video talking about why I wouldn't go see a prostitute, right? Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on my reasoning. I'll just give you the quick rundown, right? But the main reasons why I wouldn't go see a prostitute is one, it's just disgusting to me to have sex with a woman who literally lives to have sex with random men that she does not know. We already know that when a woman has a high body count or even a moderate body count, what it does to our perception of them, if we're the type of guy that cares about that kind of thing. And so you can only imagine when you're talking about a prostitute, this is a woman who's had sex with dozens, if not hundreds of men. So that's obviously a no-no. But also being someone who is really okay with being a virgin, I don't see any reason why I should pay for sex. Basically I'd be paying for something that I know I don't need. And, I would feel better giving the money away than to pay for sex. Like I'd rather give $100 to 100 person than pay $10 to have sex with a bad bitch, right? That's how much I value sex. Also, I think it's just the whole dynamic of paid sex, right? Because you're paying for sex with someone who doesn't want to have sex with you. I'm not saying that when you have sex, it's got to be like fireworks are going off in the background and violins are playing and whatnot. But at the very least, if I'm gonna have sex, I want it to be with someone who also wants to have sex with me. I want it to be a mutually enjoyed experience, not something that's one-sided. That's probably one of the biggest reasons too. This is kind of a different scenario, a quick story real quick, but I got a friend and he had sex with his girl one time who, when they first had sex, like she reluctantly gave him the sex. And she was kind of laying there like a starfish, like she was upset or something. And, this wasn't even like a prostitution situation. This was just like a girl he was talking to. And just, again, the way he described it, to have sex with somebody who obviously doesn't want it, but they're giving it to you reluctantly. Again, it's just like, it's a whole just nasty dynamic that I just want nothing to do with. Like I always say, if you don't like me, I don't like you. So I'm definitely not going to pay to have sex with someone who doesn't want to have sex with me. It's just ridiculous. But, again, I already talked about all these things. These things are known. But, it's one of those things where I've seen people debate. I've seen people debate or have this conversation about whether or not men should take the route of going to lose their virginity at a prostitute or a hooker, sex worker, however you want to spin it. And I was like, you know what? Let's go to the people. Let's go to the people and get the opinions of the people, And so I made a thread on 4chan about this topic. And so this video is really about me just going through the posts that were made in that thread. And we're going to get the opinions of just different people and whatnot. I tried to make this thread on R9K, but I couldn't get any traction. You know how random 4chan can be. But I made the thread on ADV, and it ended up being a very popular thread. It got over like 200 replies. And so, yeah, I'm going to just be going through different posts that I found in that thread. Some people who were for adult virgins going to see prostitutes, some who are against. And so we're just going to see what people generally think about it from our good pals on ADV 4chan. So I made this thread and it says, what are your thoughts on virgins using hookers to lose their virginity? Yay or nay? That picture is perfect, by the way. I love that picture. And so the first guy, he says, yay, if you're over 22. Being a virgin at that age means that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, and it's usually not something you can fix, phase, height, etc. So you should just cut your losses and fuck hookers. I kind of talked about this before. It's kind of ironic because I used that same picture when I made the thumbnail for that video, but the whole idea of, if there's something wrong with adult virgins, and it's kind of to me it's kind of a iffy implication to make, because again, and I think I talked about this in that particular video, when you see what guys who have sex, like what their problems can be as far as like their mental issues or behavior problems and whatnot, I just always kind of scoff at the idea there's something like fundamentally wrong with guys who are adult virgins. But I think the way it's being said is that, you know, there's something wrong with you in terms of like your ability to attract women, not so much as like your character or something like that. And you know, and I think that could be the case. But then you see guys who are adult virgins and they manage to lose it later in life, right? So again, it's one of those things where it's kind of, you gotta look at it on a case-by-case basis, right? Because I've seen guys lose it at far beyond 22, right? So again, and this guy says, absolutely degenerate. Prostitution is inexcusable regardless of the circumstances. From a social standpoint, it can be tolerated as the lesser of two evils, but that doesn't mean it's not intrinsically wrong. Treating virginity as a curse to be rid of to the point of excusing prostitution is also completely degenerate. Being a virgin at that age means that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Believing this is the thing that is fundamentally wrong with you. So now we got some heat, right? Already there's, you know, conflict here. But for me, I don't really look at prostitution as being like completely degenerate or inexcusable. Even though I wouldn't take that route myself, I think I must say, you know, for me, I'm not against guys taking that route. Really, I don't give a fuck. It's your life. It's just something that I'm not comfortable with, you know. But I don't really look at prostitution of itself or sex work in of itself as just this horrific thing, you know. It's just not something that's for me. And then this guy says, I think it's a good idea past a certain age. A man needs to experience penis in vagina. So he's kind of in the middle. And then this guy down here says, let's be real, A9. If you're a virgin at 22, things won't magically get better with time. Do you plan on staying a virgin forever? I think it's sad to waste your 20s and 30s without ever experiencing what sex at that age feels like. As some means point, you got to cut your losses and accept you're just never going to have sex for free. And you know, this guy, you know, even though some people might disagree with him, but some guys really, that's why I say case by case basis, some guys are really gonna be fucked when it comes to trying to get women for free. You know, some guys like Coach Greg Adams, he always says all men pay, all sex is paid for. But you know, when I say free, I mean like through a girlfriend or somebody that you met through maybe a hookup or dating app or something like that. Some guys are just really gonna be fucked in that department, especially if you want a girl that you're actually attracted to. You know, to be fair, a lot of guys only lose their virginity, only get girlfriends, only get wives because they lower their standards a lot. When you are talking about dealing with prostitutes and sex workers, you have the opportunity to get with women who are actually your type, women you're actually attracted to, right? For a price, of course. But again, that's why I say, as far as like that, I think you kind of got to look at it on a case by case basis, because you can be a late bloomer. You can be someone who just never really put in the effort or just wasn't in the right place at the right time. It could be a lot of factors. So I wouldn't just say that there's necessarily a cutoff age, but much like in the 32-year-old virgin video, I think, and this guy kind of addresses it, there is a difference, right? Or there's a limited amount of time for you to have that like early 20s or mid or 20s like sexual experience or love or relationships and things like that. But prostitution won't necessarily help you with the latter half of that. And so this guy says they should do what they want, but there's a lot of value to losing it with a hooker if you can't on your own. It will let you see the value of sex, intimacy, and give you some confidence. So this is oftentimes what people will say as the reasoning why guys should go see a prostitute, right? Just kind of give you a confidence boost and let you see the value of sex. And we're going to see posts talking more about this later on. But in general, this is something that you will see very often when guys are telling you, hey man, you might want to go see a hooker. And so this guy says, 32 here. I lost my virginity to a Chinese prostitute at age 24. Been in multiple normal relationships since then. When the topic has come up, I simply skirt around it. I have no regrets. I realized sex itself wasn't really as great as I thought it would be. This was later confirmed to be true by my other relationships. It made me realize there were more important things in life to get than your dick wet. And so this is another thing that you would see people saying is that, you know, the value of going to go see a prostitute is to sort of demystify sex, to take some of the wonder away from it, right? But I feel like just in my case in particular, this was something that I never really needed, or rather, I was never someone that had this idea that sex was going to solve all my problems or sex was the reasoning for my depression or anything like that. You know, I realized at a young age that, and not trying to be, you know, sour grapes about it, but I just realized that, again, sex isn't the end all be all or cure all for any sort of ailment or illness or dis-ease you might have with yourself or life in general or whatnot. You know, one of the things I realized very young was that a lot of the people around me that were sexually active, had children or had girlfriends, whatever the case may be, they still found ways to be miserable. They still found reasons to be unhappy. They still had problems. They still had issues. It's not like you have sex and then all of a sudden you're teleported to an oasis of nirvana and an epiphany into heaven or some shit, right? That's just not how it works. I'm sure that it's probably an enjoyable experience. Don't get me wrong, the way people crash out and do as much dumb shit as they do to get sex. But I just never had like a ridiculous perspective of it to the point where I thought it was gonna, you know, solve my problems or anything like that. But I do have to wonder, this guy had to really, you know, he had to really have a grand view of what he thought sex was, right? Because, you know, oftentimes you'll see people say, you know, sex without intimacy is you know, not comparable to sex with intimacy, and that, you know, sex with someone you love is all great, but he's just like, nah, it just fuck all of it. It ain't amazing. But maybe he just had like a totally warped view of what it would do for him. So this guy says it's always better to do it with someone you love who loves you than to hook up with a prostitute. Or you could also have sex with a friend. That's fun, but I think losing it to a prostitute is kind of wrong. Ultimately, it's your decision. And then the guy under him says, bro, virgins can't get a girlfriend or female fuck buddies. That's why they are virgins. But this is something that, and part of the reason why I would rather not go see a prostitute. You know, I just imagine that it would be better to do it with someone that maybe you got to be in love with them, right? I guess I'm too tough to use that word, but again, just somebody that you're actually in a relationship with, somebody that you've gotten to know beyond just their physical attributes, someone that you can respect as far as like their character and whatnot, and someone you really feel comfortable with, as opposed to a complete stranger. Again, this is just the imaginings of a virgin, but you know, correct me if I'm wrong. But it does seem like, you know, that would just be a overall better experience. But I think that what prostitution probably has in its favor is that you can just kind of select exactly what you want as far as those physical attributes. You know, oftentimes when you're talking about a relationship or somebody that you know, quote unquote love, you know, oftentimes you kind of settle a little bit in certain areas, you know, even if they are exceptional in terms of their character, your compatibility, your chemistry. It might not be exactly your type. You know what I'm saying? You might have got with a 5 or a 6, but with a prostitute, you can get that 7, 8, right? But like the guy at the bottom says, you know, virgins can't get a girlfriend or female fuck buddies. That's why they are virgins. So, you know, I get what he's saying there. But that kind of goes back to the original points I was making, though, where case by case basis, right? The word can't, you know, you gotta kind of be careful using that word. And so, oh, that's a nice picture. This guy says, it depends if it is something that they will use to cross the mental barrier, then it can be useful. But that is not the solution. They mostly have a problem of how to talk to girls and how to interact. And prostitutes do not solve that problem. The main thing is that they are mostly addicted to the virtual pussy. This can point them in the this can point them in the, I'm assuming he meant to say direction in the real pussy, but that can't prepare them for finding a girlfriend. Conclusion, it is better to spend money on prostitutes than on OnlyFans, but not ideal. And I think this guy makes a great point. Look at what he says about like the mental barrier. But the mental barrier can vary, right? And I think what he's talking about is how, like, just like in my case, right, when I look at sex, even though I don't put it on a pedestal or anything like that, in my mind, it just seems crazy to think that I would ever have sex. Like, I feel so far removed from the world of having sex and intimacy and things like that. It really does feel like there's a giant wall between me and sex. And you know, a lot of that is of my own choosing and own doing, don't get me wrong. But it does feel like there's a significant gap between me and the act. And a lot of it is probably mental. You know, I talked about the different traumas and the effect that it had on me growing up in regards to my relationship with women and how I've never really addressed them because I never had to. I think that could be identified or labeled properly as a mental barrier. But like this guy says, you know, it's not going to solve like the deeper underlying issues, right? Of how to talk to girls and interact with them. You're not going to get that. You know, I think at best, you know, going to see prostitutes, it can give you some confidence and demystify your perception of what sex is. But there is like, that's only one thing. Having to actually talk to girls and, you know, deal with potential rejection, navigating that complicated maze of saying and doing all the right things, going out on dates, how you present yourself. A prostitute isn't going to teach you that, right? It'll only probably give you some general confidence surrounding, you know, sex and maybe interacting with women somewhat. But the actual game, because it really is kind of a, I wouldn't say complex, it can be, but it really is like a game. And I would say it's almost like the difference between learning how to play like 2K versus learning how to play basketball in real life. Basically, like, it's probably that big of a gap when you're talking about going to see prostitutes versus actually learning how to deal with and attract women outside of the realm of paying for sex. And so this guy says, I also lost my virginity to a Chinese prostitute 2 years ago. I wish I would have never done that. I still regret it to this day. So posts like these or stories like these, one of the main reasons why I would never go see a prostitute. And you know, the stories always vary. You got some guys who, you know, they embrace going to see prostitutes, they had fun and whatnot, but you do not want to be this guy. You don't want to be the guy, because, and that's the troublesome thing about it, right? Because you don't really know how you're going to react to it. You don't know. And I think part of it, like, you got to understand who you are if you want to kind of guess, right? You can guesstimate how you would feel about it. And I just think based on who I am as a person, it just wouldn't be for me, right? Based on the reasonings I gave earlier. But I think it says a lot about myself, you know, the fact that I even concern myself with the points that I made. And I think, again, that's where self-knowledge comes into play. Some guys are really just built for to see prostitutes and not give a fuck, right? Like, literally. And then this guy says, I wouldn't recommend it unless you have literally zero options like me. But if you have a chance to fuck a woman and get close with a woman by not paying for it directly, then I say you shouldn't start paying for sex. I pay for sex because I literally do not know how to socialize or be normal. So paying for sex is simple, direct, and convenient. I don't understand women or people at all. And it's clear that a woman isn't fucking me unless I pay for it. Now, I'm not going to try to diagnose this guy based on like this little post here, but, you know, the first thought that came to my mind that, you know, this guy really talks like he is extremely autistic, like not just haha meme autistic, but literally autistic. Because I can imagine a guy like that, you know, having this amount of problems attracting and dealing with women. I mean, because he straight up says, I don't know how to socialize. I don't know how to be normal. Right. And so I can see how for someone like that it's just so much self. And that's why what I meant when I said earlier, though, right? Some guys are really just built for it, because one, they understand that they don't have, I don't want to put them down like that to say they can't or what they don't, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to say it like that, but where they are at a certain point in life is just, they just don't have those skills. And they don't seem to want to try to develop them either. And so what do? They say, I'll just go see a prostitute, right? And so this guy says, every white prostitute I've met has been really nice. Every Asian one treats you like a diseased nuisance on the production line. Do not go to streetwalkers or cheap crack whores, obviously. Fancy escorts are good, but don't trust them if they trust you too much. The more careful they are about hygiene, the more trustworthy they are. So he's kind of giving you some advice here. I don't know how true this is based on like I don't know the quality of service you're gonna get based on the race of the woman that you're dealing with, but this guy seems like he has some experience. I'm assuming when he says streetwalkers or cheap crack whores, he's talking about black women. I hate to say it, but and so this guy says, I did just that. I have only not paid for sex once so far, maybe twice if you count one of the escorts I hired, then hiring me for a job, which effectively refunded me, but we're also just outright friends now, so that's cool. In terms of anxiety around sex itself, gone. Anxiety, discomfort around offering sex without finances, we're working on it. One thing that changes is learning how easy it is to pay for good to great sex. It's very addicting. At least for me, escorts are fantastic at conversation, at least the ones I've hung out with. I go as far as to recommend hiring someone for sex just once for anyone if you can afford it, but I'm getting sidetracked. Losing virginity is one hurdle, but you don't really learn how your body sexuality in a sense without continuous sex. So unless you date someone, it'll get very expensive. Got very expensive, started going to non-Asian massage parlors to curb my spending. So this guy, again, he sounds very experienced with going to go see prostitutes, but he did notice that there was a reduction as far as like his anxiety surrounding sex itself, right? But notice what he says here, where he says anxiety and discomfort around offering sex without finances, he's still working on it, right? So this is kind of in line with what we were talking about earlier, where going to go see a prostitute, it helps with like one aspect of your issues with women as far as like your perception of sex and some comfort around them. But it's a different ball game when you're talking about actually wooing and courting a woman and trying to get her to have sex with you based on who you are, your accomplishments, the way you of course your looks, but also how you modify your looks, how you present yourself, the way you dress, the cologne, all this shit, haircut, like that's a whole different game. And like he said, it can get very addicting, because you're able to just directly pay for, good, as he says, good to great sex. Also, this point here I think is important. He says, losing your virginity is one hurdle, but you don't really learn your body or sexuality in a sense without continuous sex, right? And so unless you date someone, it'll get very expensive. So as you can imagine, if you got a girlfriend, y'all can fuck several times throughout the week, based on your sex drives or whatnot. It varies. But you don't have to give your girlfriend hundreds of dollars every time you have, well, sometimes, right? That's why I say it varies. But let's assume it's a normal relationship and you guys are really attracted to each other and you're just fucking like rabbits, right? You're fucking like 4 or 5 times a week at least, even adjusting for the typical investment a man makes into a relationship. It's going to be a lot cheaper to have sex with your girlfriend 4 or 5 times a week than it would be to have sex with a prostitute 4 or 5 times a week, and so much like a lot of skills or trying to understand something, it requires consistency, and so if you're trying to get good at sex, the problem with hookers or sex workers is that you're gonna have to keep paying to get the hours in, to get those reps in, right? And again, just another good point that he made.